Hey guys, and welcome to another one of my tutorials. In this video, I'll be showing you how to set up zombies and zombie hordes and all the logic that you're going to need to have zombies in your game, or at least to get you started. So a few disclaimers up front. So this environment that you see, I got this from the store. If you want it, you can grab it. It's absolutely not required to follow this tutorial. You don't need it. I just have it in here to kind of demo off the logic that I wrote. But it's called Modern City Download, or Modern City Downtown with Interiors Mega Pack. Again, you don't need that at all for the tutorial, but if you want to grab it, that's what it's called. And then the zombies themselves, the models for them, I got offline, off Mixamo, and I'll be showing you how to do that in the tutorial. But this tutorial is not focused on the art or the zombie models or the animations or anything like artistic. So some of it is like not super great because I didn't want to waste a lot of time making it like amazing when that's not the point of the tutorial. The point of the tutorial is the code and logic behind these zombies and getting them to work. So basically basically the way the system kind of works is that you can have these zombies like you see right now, and once the player kind of gets close to them, they'll come and attack you. And if you shoot them, I just kind of have this hilarious like impact effect, and they kind of ragdoll. You can see the ragdoll's not great. Again, that's just because the assets, I just got them offline, and the Unreal doesn't do a great job of making like physics assets for models. But in your game, hopefully you would have better ragdoll models than I do. And so these are like basic zombies. And then I also have this concept of trigger boxes that kind of trigger zombies. So if I step out real quick, um, and I go and I look around the corner here, you can see there's no zombies right now. But if I step back in and I step forward, you can see I'll kind of trigger them and they'll all spawn. And this is really useful because you don't want to have all these zombies just chilling in your map when you start the game, because it's going to hurt your performance if you have a bunch of zombies. And you can see at the top left, it's actually keeping track of how many of the zombies there are, and that's the AI director doing its work, and I'll show you that in a minute. But I basically have a system that's set up that can spawn zombies whenever the player gets into a certain area, and it will also make sure that they don't spawn too many of them and that they don't spawn too frequently. So you can see as I walk around the environment, there's only 7 zombies right now, and you can see once I get close, now there's 16 because they spawn down here inside of this little thing. And so it's a really nice system that, it makes it appear like your level has a bunch of zombies in it, when in reality it doesn't, and so it's not too expensive on performance. And you can also do cool things like spawning them on top of buildings. Let me see if I can get over this. There we go. You can see when I get up close here, they're going to start jumping off this roof, and of course it spawned like 50 of them. That guy just flew up in the air, don't know why. There is a little bug where they like get too close to the gun so you can't shoot them, but yeah, I didn't spend a whole lot of time making the nav meshes perfect, so sometimes they get stuck up there, but you kind of get the idea of how it works. Let me just kill a few more, and I got one more little trigger box over this way. And so you can kind of like see what's going on. Get another one right here, and you see it spawns a whole bunch of them. Now there's 50 zombies. And you can tweak the parameters and stuff as much as you want. I didn't spend a whole lot of time like trying to make it fair or even or whatever. But yeah, so that's the general idea of how it will look when you're finished. And so the system in general, the way it works is that you have this director, and the director, every time a zombie is spawned or killed, the director is aware of it, and so it keeps track. You can see over here I have max zombies. It keeps track of how many zombies there are in the world and makes sure that it doesn't ever get more than whatever you have set here. And that's mostly for performance reasons, but also for like fairness. If you have a smaller map, maybe you don't want more than 30 zombies being spawned at once so that the player doesn't get overwhelmed. So the director handles all of that. And then I also have these what is this? Yeah, Horde spawner. So you can see a Horde spawner, it basically defines a box. So once the player gets in here, and then it also has a spawn point associated with it. And so whenever you get inside this box, it's going to spawn here. And you can specify how many you want to spawn when you get inside of this box. So a minimum of 10 and a maximum of 20, and then the location that you want to spawn them at. And that's pretty much all it is, aside from the actual logic inside of the zombies that tell them where to go. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick rundown of the system to show you kind of how it works so that you get an idea. And with that being said, we'll go ahead and jump right into it. So we're going to be doing all of this from scratch. So go ahead and launch whatever version you have. I'm on 4.25.1. I would recommend being on that one or newer, just so you can follow along with the tutorial without any problems. And you want to go to games down here and then next. And we're going to be using the first person template. The only reason I'm using the first person one is because he has a gun, so I can shoot them. So you could do this in third person as well, just fine. And we don't need any starter content. I'm just going to call this Horde tutorial. I'll go ahead and create the project. So there's a good amount of setup we're going to need to do before we can kind of jump into the actual logic of this. And the first thing I'm going to do is load up that map, and I'm just going to edit this out real quick so you guys don't have to wait. Actually, let's go ahead and wait a little bit to do that, and let's just get the zombie set up first. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go over to Mixamo if you don't already have a character that you want to use. And we're just going to be using this one for the tutorial, this little zombie guy. So if you go to characters at the top and search for zombie, he should show up. Feel free to use a different one if you want, but I'm going to use this one, so I'm going to hit download, and then we want FBX and T-pose, and then we can hit download. And that's going to go ahead and download this character as an FBX file. So once that finishes downloading, let me see, show it in the folder. So all you got to do is take this, download, and drag it into the content folder. Actually, I don't want to drag it in there. Let's make a folder in the main content folder, and let's call it zombie. So new folder, zombie. And then inside of here, let's make another new folder called resources, just to keep things organized. And then we're going to need another one called blueprints eventually, so we'll just go ahead and make that. So in the resources folder, drag that downloaded FBX file into here, and just go ahead and make sure that these are checked for skeletal mesh and import mesh, and then hit import all, and then give it a second. All right, and then back over here, you can see we now have our little skeleton guy. So we need to add a couple of animations for him. Again, this is not an animation tutorial, so I'm not going to go in depth with how to set up animations, but we will grab a few basic ones. So back over here on Mixamo, let's go to animations, and if you search for zombie at the top, and maybe scroll down, let's try to find a running one. I think this is the one I was used. It's called zombie running, and we want to make sure that we have in place check so that it doesn't have root motion associated with it. And then we can go ahead and hit download on this one. And then when this pops up, we want to make sure that we have without skin, because we don't need the skin, because we already have the skin or the model for the character, so we want it without the skin. And then we can hit download again. Give this a second to download. And then back over here in our download folder, mine's called Zombie Running 2 because I already downloaded it once. But basically, you just want to take this and drag it in and say, make sure it has the Warzone F skeleton on the one that we just imported. Make sure it has that selected and say import all. And then we want one more for idling. So come up here to the top, and I'm just going to search for zombie idle, just to kind of narrow it down. And I think the one I used in the tutorial was this one. Or this one probably, yeah. And so let's go ahead and download this one as well. And make sure you have without skin checked, and then hit download. And then once that finishes downloading, we can go back to the download folder and drag it in as well. Say import all. Okay, so now we have our zombie, and we have the animations that we need for it. So the next thing we want to do is make a character for our zombie. So let's come back here to the content folder, and let's actually go back into zombies and go back into blueprints. And then inside of here, we're going to make the blueprint for the zombie. So if we right click and make a new blueprint class, we want it to be of type character, since it's a character, and we'll call it BP underscore zombie. And then let's go ahead and double click on this to open it up. And you can see by default, it doesn't have a character mesh assigned to it. So that's the first thing we want to do. So back here, if we click on the mesh and we search for skeletal meshes, we want to click on the Warzone F Petaroso or whatever, which is the one we just imported. And then we're going to need to drag him down and give him a nice rotation of like 90 degrees. Compile and save. And then the next thing we want to do is make it so he actually has an animation playing. So to do that, let's go back here to the animation. So go to resources. And so here are our two animations. And we need to create an animation blueprint based on these animations. So if we right click and say animation, and then we begin to go to animation blueprint, it's going to ask us which skeleton we want to use for our animation blueprint. And of course, we want to use this war zombie skeleton. So hit OK. And we'll call this AB for animation blueprints underscore zombie. And then I'm just going to reference my other code. So go ahead and double click on this to open it up. So inside of here, we're not going to do a whole lot. The first thing we want to do is we want to keep track of the zombie's speed so that we know which animation to play. So if we come to the event graph, we're just going to add a little bit of code here. We're going to say try get pawn owner, say get visibility, or not visibility, get velocity. And then if we take the vector length of that for the x and the y, so we want vector length xy, that will give us the speed of the zombie on the xy plane, which is the horizontal plane. And we can right click this and promote it to a variable and hook it up. And then over here, I'm going to rename it to speed. All right, and then if we go to the animation graph, now that we have the speed, we want to make a new state machine here for the locomotion. So right click and say state machine, and then we'll rename this to basic locomotion and hook that up to the output pose. And then we can double click on this to edit it. So inside of here, we basically just want to go between these two poses, idle and running, based on the speed. So let's drag in idle, and let's drag in running to the right of it. And we want to hook up the entry to the idle by default. And then from idle, we're going to be able to go to running, so we'll drag over here. And then from running, we're also going to be able to go back to idle, so we'll drag on over here. And then all we need to do is set up these transition nodes to transition at the correct times. So if we double click on this top one here, we basically want to say that the animation can transition from idle to running if the speed is greater than 0. So if we drag in speed, we'll say float greater. So if it's greater than 0, and maybe we should use like 0.1 instead, just so if he's barely moving, he still doesn't actually start running. So if it's greater than 0.1, we can transition, and then we can transition back from running into idle whenever it is less than 0.1. So we'll double click on this one and drag in the speed again. So this time we'll say float less, and we'll use 0.1, and we'll hook that up like so. Compile and save, file, save all. All right, so now you can see our guy is kind of doing his thing. He's kind of animating a little bit. And we can now go back to our BP zombie. And if we click on our mesh, and then we click on under the anim class, we select the AV zombie, you can see he's now playing his little animation. And at this point, we can drag this guy into the world. So let's go to our blueprint folder, and we'll drag in one of our zombies just so we can see it working. And if we press play, you can see he's standing there and he's animating, but of course there's no logic associated. Ooh, that's really loud. Let's turn that down. There's no logic associated with him yet. So yeah, let me turn on that gun sound because I don't know why, but it's super loud. If you want to do the same as in first person blueprint, blueprints, first person character, and then this play firing sound. If you hit this drop down, we can change the volume multiplier to like 0.02, make it really quiet. All right, so now we have our zombie set up, sort of. The next thing we need to do is make it so that he has some AI so that he knows, how to get to the player and how to attack the player. So whenever you're working with AI, you're going to need a AI controller that basically is controlling how the AI works. So to do that, let's go back to our zombie folder, and then we'll go to our blueprints folder. And then we're going to right click, go to blueprint class again. Actually, it might be under artificial. Oh, it's not. Okay, it's here. But yeah, go to blueprint class, and then we want to search in the all classes for AI controller. Now, when you search for AI controller, you actually see a few things pop up. We have this AI controller, which is the base class, and then there's actually this Detour Crowd AI controller, and we're going to use that one. And the reason we're using this one is because this one has some built-in functionality to help manage crowds of AI, like zombies or like hordes of AI. It kind of keeps them like separated from each other a little bit, and they're not so like stupid. They kind of know about each other. So we're going to use this one, the Detour Crowd AI controller. So select that one, and it's going to create your little AI controller over here, and we're going to call this zombie controller. And then we're going to need a few more things. So the next thing we want is a behavior tree. If you don't know what a behavior tree is, we'll kind of be getting into that here shortly. But for now, just go ahead and right click, go to artificial intelligence, and hit behavior tree. and we'll call this BT for behavior tree underscore zombie. And then whenever you have a behavior tree, you also need a blackboard. So right click, go to artificial intelligence and hit blackboard. And we'll call this BB for blackboard underscore zombie. And we want one more thing. So right click, go to blueprints, and then go to enumeration. And this is going to be an enum which keeps track of the state of the zombie. So we'll call it zombie, if I can type, zombie AI state. Okay, so file, save all, just so we don't lose anything. All right, so let's go ahead and write this first because it's going to be really easy. So for this zombie AI state, the zombie can be in two states, at least in my little demo project. He can either be idling or he can be chasing the player. So we're going to hit new, and we'll call this first one idle, and we'll call the second one chasing. Make it file. You can save that and close it. Come back here. So the next thing we want to edit is this zombie controller. Yeah, we'll do that next. So let's open up the zombie controller. And we basically need to tell it that the zombie controller should be using this behavior tree, or this behavior tree, and that this behavior tree should be using this blackboard. So to do that, inside the zombie controller, we can go to the event graph, and in the begin play event, we want to call run behavior tree. And we want to select our BT zombie behavior tree from the dropdown. And then we also want to say use blackboard so that it knows which blackboard to use. So we'll say use blackboard. And the blackboard we want to use is, of course, our BB zombie blackboard. And that's pretty much all we really need to do inside of here, at least for right now. So you can go ahead and just close this. And then we need to tell our zombie that we want to use that AI controller. So we click on our BP zombie, and we go to class settings, no, class defaults, yes, class defaults. And then on the right, you'll see we have a section here for the AI controller class, and it's currently set to AI controller. We want to change it to our zombie controller down here at the bottom. And we also want to change this auto possess, or sorry, not that. We want to change auto possess AI to be placed in world or spawned. And the reason you need to do that is because otherwise the controller will not possess the spawn, or will not possess the zombie when he's spawned. It will only possess him if he's like dropped in the world initially. So make sure you have these two set, placed in world on spawn and zombie controller. Okay, so now it's using our controller, and our controller is using our blackboard. However, our blackboard doesn't actually do anything. Or not blackboard, I mean behavior tree. Sorry, there's a lot of terminology here. So I'll repeat it since I screwed up. So our zombie is using our zombie controller, and our zombie controller is using our behavior tree. However, our behavior tree is not doing anything. If you double click on it, you can see it just has this root node here, and it's totally empty. So the next thing we want to do is fill this out so that it actually does something. So we're going to need a few little tasks and sequences here. If you've never used a behavior tree, then I guess this will be a tutorial for you on behavior trees. I'm not going to go in depth of about how they work, but I'll be showing you a good amount of stuff you can probably infer how they kind of work. So the first thing we want is a selector. So if you right click and search for selector, we're going to add one of these. And if you don't know what a selector does, it basically just selects the children below it, and it stops executing whenever one of them succeeds. So we want to hook that up to the root. And then we want to add something called a service. So if you come here to the top, we can hit new service. And that actually creates one. So if we browse to it, you can see it creates it right here in this zombie folder, which I guess is fine. And we'll call this update target. So what this service is going to do is it's going to be running like constantly, or not constantly, but it's going to be running like every second or so. And every second or so, it's going to be checking for where the player is and trying to check if we're close enough to the player to attack him. If we are, then it's going to switch him over to attacking. So if we double click on this now that we have it renamed to something that makes more sense, we want to add an event. So over here on the left, if you override functions, you can see there's a bunch of functions. We want the receive tick AI. So this is going to get called every not every frame, but it's going to get called every time that this service executes, because services don't execute every frame. They execute every second or 2 seconds or whatever you set them to. And I'll show you where to do that in a second. But you can kind of think this as the event tick. It runs more or less, every frame pretty frequently. So inside of here, like I said before, we want to check if the player is close enough to the zombie that the zombie should go and attack him. So we're going to drag off of this and we're going to say get actor location. And this is the location of the zombie because that's the controlled pawn. And we want to get the location of the player. So we'll get player controller. And then we'll say get actor location. So we have the zombie's location and then we have the player's location. And we want to get the distance between them. So we'll say distance. And we actually are going to use this distance squared vector just as a little optimization. If you don't know, in computer programming, taking the square root of something is considered kind of expensive. It's not like a huge deal, but if you can not do it, then it's better not to. So we're actually going to get the squared distance between them. And then we're going to check if that's less than some value. So say float less. And then over here on the left, we want to make a variable so that who's ever using this node can specify, the distance that they want zombies to be perceptive at. So we'll hit a little float variable here, and we'll say perception distance, and we'll make it a float. And then it's really important that you hit this little eye icon, or otherwise it won't be exposed inside the behavior tree later. And so we want to check if it's less than this value. So drag this in. But again, we took the squared distance, so we just want to square this real quick. So we'll say square. And since the distance is squared and both of these are squared, so they're going to compare, equally to each other because they're both squared. And then we'll drag up this and we'll say branch. Oops. So again, what this branch is checking is just, is the player close enough to, consider we should go and attack him. So if it is, then we want to set our zombie to have a target for the player, and we also want to change his state from idle to chasing. So to do that, we're going to need to take in 2 values from our blackboard. And I know we haven't set up our blackboard yet, but we will be doing that shortly, so this will make more sense. But for now, just add a variable and call it AI target. We want to change the type of it to be blackboard key selector, and then add one more variable called AI state. And we also want this to be a blackboard key selector as well. And then make sure you hit the I again on both of these. It's really important that you do that, otherwise they will not show up in your behavior tree later when we try to use them. Okay, so essentially these are just values from our blackboard. Again, it'll make more sense once we add them to the blackboard, but for now, just add them here. And we're going to be setting them, so they're kind of like out parameters. So if we are close enough to the player where we want to engage them, then we want to drag in our AI target, and we want to set it to our player to say, okay, AI, your target is now the player. So if we drag off of this, we can say set blackboard value, and you can see we have all these options here. And so depending on what your AI target is, determines which one of these you need to use. And since our AI target is the player, we know that the player is an actor or an object, so we want to use set blackboard value as object. And we'll hook that up to true. And so the value is the player, so we want to just copy this, get player controller, or not player controller. This should be get player character, sorry. Get player character. So we want to hook up this. So get player character. So now we set the target for the AI to the player. And the next thing we need to do is tell the zombie that he should be chasing. So again, we'll drag in the AI state, and we're going to use this again, set blackboard value as, and since this is an enum, we want to use enum, so set blackboard value as enum. And then we need to set this to something. So the enum type is this zombie AI state enum that we created earlier, if you remember right here. It just has idle and chasing in it. So if we right click and say literal enum zombie AI state and click on that, it will allow us to select from a dropdown which one we want, and of course we want chasing, and then we can just hook that up to the enum like so. And we kind of want to do the opposite of this if it's false. So like that, check it down here. So this way, if the player ends up getting far enough away from the zombie, then the zombie will stop chasing him. If you don't want that behavior, obviously you can change this and maybe just get rid of this section down here if you just want the zombie to always chase him once he sees him. But in my thing, I have it so that if the player gets far enough away, then the zombie just kind of gives up. So we want to set the AI's target to nothing, so we'll just delete this. So we're setting the value to nothing. And we want to set the state back to idle, just like that. Okay, so now we have our service written, so let's go ahead and make use of it. So back in the behavior tree, if you select the selector and right-click, you have some options here for things you want to add. And of course, we want to add a service because that's what we just created. And these ones right here are just defaults inside of Unreal, but this is the one that we just created, the update target. So go ahead and select that. Now, once you select it, it will add it to the selector. And if you click on it, you can set some details for it. So over here on the right is kind of what I was talking about the tick. You can see it runs every 0.5 seconds with a random deviation of 0.1. So that essentially means it's going to run randomly between 0.4 seconds and 0.6 seconds. But we don't really need to have a random deviation on this, and 0.5 seconds is probably even, like, we can probably go up to 1, and we'll set the random deviation to 0. So that basically means that this this service will run every second. So every second, it's going to be checking if the player is close enough for him to attack. And the reason you don't want to just set this to like a very small number, you're saying, well, why shouldn't this just run every frame? Is because of performance, right? You don't want to, there's no reason that this needs to be checking literally every single frame for the player. Checking every second is good enough. The player's not going to be able to perceive the difference either way. And then the other thing I was talking about before is you can see up here at the top, it has this default section. So these are all of these variables that we added. If you don't see these here, then it's because you didn't check this little I checkbox. So make sure you have the I checkbox checks and they'll all show up. So these are essentially input parameters. So we can set them to whatever we want. So the perception distance is how far the zombie can see, essentially, or how close the player has to be before the zombie will attack him. So I'm going to set to something like 2500. And then the AI target, you can see we actually don't have any options for these. And that's because we haven't set up our Blackboard yet. So we need to add variables to our Blackboard in order for them to show up in this list. So you can actually hit up here at the top right, and it will bring you over to your Blackboard. And this Blackboard, if you browse to it, it's just the one that we created earlier, right here, PP Zombie. So inside of here, we want to create a few variables. We want to have one for the target that the zombie is currently attacking. We want to have one for the state of the zombie. And actually, that's it. We only need 2. So to do that, we want to add a new key. So I have this little new key button and search for search for actor, I think. No, object maybe. Yeah, search for object. And hit that, and then call it AI target. So we've specified that our AI target is going to be an object. However, we need to specify even further that the specific type of object that it's going to be is our our first person character. So in this little drop down here, search for first person character. And then we're good. And then we want to add one for the state. So add another one for an enum, and we'll call it AI state. And again, we specified that it's an enum, but we need to specify even more specifically what enum it is. So in that same drop-down area, we want to select our zombie AI state. And we can save this as well. And back in our behavior tree now, if we save everything and we click on our service again, you can see now it's kind of auto-populated these for us, and it did this one correct. So AI target set to AI target, but we want to set AI state to AI state. Now, it's really important that you have these set up, and sometimes Unreal will just like change these on you like that, and they'll be wrong. So if something is not working in your behavior tree, or your character's not running, or like something's happening with your zombie that's wrong, the first thing you should check is that these variables are set up correctly. That AI target is set to AI target and AI state is set to AI state. Otherwise, it will not work. Okay, so that's our service. So that runs every frame. Or sorry, not every frame. That runs every second. And so depending on what the current AI state is, we either want to just chill and do nothing if we're set to idle, or we want to find the player and chase him if it's set to chasing. So we want 2 tasks. So if you right click and we have this task option, we want to wait if we're idle. So we'll use this one. And if we're not idle, we want to use one called move to. So right click again and go to move to. So you can see this is if we're idle, and this is if we are chasing. But obviously we can't just drag these in because there's nothing that's telling it, which one to use at which case. So to do that, we can actually right click on weight and say add decorator. And if we select this blackboard one, what this does is that it reads a value from the blackboard and it's like a conditional check on that value. So let's go ahead and just click on this. It sees as is blue blackboard based condition. And if you click on that blackboard based condition, we have some options over here on the right. So the main ones we care about is this section called Blackboard. And so it's asking, okay, which key do you want to look at? So we want to look at the AI state. And then it's asking, okay, what value are you looking for? And in this case, since we're waiting, we're looking for idle. So we want to leave this one as idle. And then what do we want to check about it? Well, we want to check if it's equal to idle. So essentially we're saying we want to check is AI state equal to idle? And if it is, then it will continue executing down this list. So then we'll call wait. So we can hook this up. And we can actually just rename this to make it a little bit more clear. We'll just say like idle question mark. So again, you can kind of think of it like a branch statement in a way. If you're following the execution and then we get to this blue one, it's saying, is it idle? And if it is, then it will keep going. If it's not, then it will fail. So we only want to wait if we're idle. And we want to do the same thing with move to. So if we right click and say add decorator, blackboard, and I'm going to call this one chasing question mark. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. We want to rename the blue one chasing question mark. And again, we want to do the same thing, except we want to check if it's chasing. So we'll change this to AI state instead of AI target. And we want to change the key value to chasing. And we will make sure this is set to is equal to. And then we will hook that up like so. So this is a very simple behavior tree. Obviously, you can expand on this more if you want your zombie to do more stuff. But for this simple tutorial, this is going to work just fine. All right, so let's file and save all. So I think at this point, if I didn't forget anything, he might follow the character. Oh, actually, we need to add a Navmesh first for it to work. So we come back to our scene. In order to have any sort of path finding or movement of AI, you need to have a Navmesh. So over here on the left, if you search for nav, we want this, which one is it? Navmesh bounds volume. Yeah, Navmesh bounds volume. So drag this in. By default, it's this small little box, and it's hard to tell what's going on, but if you come up here to show and you hit navigation, it will actually show the navigation. And as long as the box is overlapping with something, so we drag it down so it overlaps with the ground, you can see it draws this green little whatever. And what this is anywhere that's green, it represents area that the AI can walk on. So if we want to make it bigger, we just scale it. So we drag it this way, and you can see it recalculates it, and it kind of takes it a second, but it works pretty quick. And so you can see if we drag it over the whole scene, it automatically determines, okay, you can't walk here because there's a box here, and it figures out, how the character can walk before the game even starts, which is really nice. All right, so now we have all that set up. Let's see if this works. This might not work, but hopefully it works. All right, so let's see if he comes and gets me here. It might take a second. All right, there we go. Just kind of takes a second to get everything initialized, but you can see it comes and attacks me. And if we change this in the behavior tree, if we change this perception distance to like 500, for example, just to show you like how it works. And then I back up. So he probably won't come and attack me because I'm not within the 500 range. But as soon as I get within 500 units of him, he will come and attack me. And you can see there he goes. All right, so at this point, I'm going to end this video and go on to part 2. So I'll see you in the next part.